Hello, everyone. Hey, Mark.
How'd you enjoy your weekend?
I enjoy every day, man. I'm above ground. When you're above ground, you got options. And actually, my son's here for a while for a couple of weeks. So we golfed and just hung out together. So that's always good.
Yeah, it is always good.
Yeah. How was yours?
Pretty relaxing, all things considered. Although I wish I could see my nieces more.
Yeah. That's right. You told me before you tend to have fun with them.
That's probably because I let them get away with everything.
Isn't that what uncles are for?
Exactly! That's my argument!
Let's see. I may still have that up. Let's see if I do. And that's nothing. All right. Chrome of Google.
Hey, Professor. The last class you told us that we could start sending you books that we wanted to write about to get
Yes, ma'am.
approval. Okay. I just have a question. So I'm thinking about doing what's it called? Green Eggs and Ham by Dr. Seuss.
That's a good one.
And I was just wondering, like, I was gonna do it because I feel like for a project like this, you kind of need more than like one character to go off of, so you can do different perspectives of different points of views of each character, right?
Sure.
Okay. I just wanted to see if that was like a good idea. I wasn't sure.
Well, it's hard for someone who grew up with being read Dr. Seuss almost every day to complain about Dr. Seuss. So probably had a good choice. Yeah, so no, that's fine. All right, let's see. Now I can share with you guys. Okay, so any questions from anything we talked about the last time before we get into correlations? No. Okay. All right. So this is where we left off, or actually not where we left off. This is where we left off on research and archival research. But today we'll go ahead and start into correlations. And the reason that I wanted to wait on correlations was not that it's a complex area, but it's enough of a nuance that if we don't cover it well, it's easy to confuse. So this will hopefully just make it easier. Let's see, I got a few folks coming in. All right. So here's the biggest statement, the one for you to remember, and there'll be others, but this one is very important. And that is that correlation does not equal causation. Correlation does not equal causation. So the defining point there, one is correlations show relationship, but it does not mean that the relationship, again, is causal. So for instance, if I have, let's say that every time it rains, how do I want to do this? Yeah, every time it rains, for some reason, my son comes home. Well, rain doesn't cause him to come home, nor his coming home causes rain. However, if they seem to happen regularly in conjunction with each other, then I can say that there's a relationship, but neither causes the other to exist. Well, let's make this a question. And you can put this in the chat room as a yes or no answer, or actually, let's do it this way. If you open the participant panel, you will have a yes, no button. So I would like for you to respond with yes or no to this statement. The sale of ice cream is the same as increased crime rate. Sale of ice cream is the same or very similar to high crime rates. So in the participant box, click yes or no. Okay, I've got some no's. Let's see. Ooh, I've got one yes so far. Oh, two yeses. Okay. So either Stephen or let me see who my other person was, or Kyron. Why did you guys say yes and everyone else say no? Well, you don't have to speak to why they said no, but why did you say yes?
I thought of it as, since I've taken like criminology and
Oh, so you have some insights?
yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So
Let's let Kyron do it.
all right, that's fine.
Thank you.
Well, I don't have any like insight or anything, but I just kind of figured that crime rate would be like high. I don't know. I mean, I'm not speaking like as to what's going on now. I'm just saying like maybe crime rate's high because my family is from New Orleans and I know that crime is kind of high there, like in all the cities.
Well, how does that relate to ice cream sales?
I don't know. I don't know honestly. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, your answer is still correct, and I will actually. Stephen, would you like to explain why?
I'm not sure if my answer is correct, but how I
Well,
think about it.
So you're 50% right or 50% wrong. So go ahead.
Yeah, so I think about it as like one theory for why crime is, rampant or in one area than the other is just, what is it? So what I'm trying to get at is, if there's ice cream, people
Mhm.
are gonna buy it, right?
Yep.
It doesn't matter. If there's ice cream, somebody's gonna want ice cream.
Okay.
And for some people, I mean, some people just have a intuition sometimes to commit crime, whether it's through outside reasons or whatever. So people are going to commit crime anyway. Like, you can't get rid of all crime. It's like the same thing. You can't get rid of all ice cream because somebody's going to want ice cream.
You
That's
started off good and then you trailed away into the
Yeah, I
wilderness.
apologize about that. I'm not the best at articulation, but
No.
it sounded good in my
What,
head.
no, what I meant was your premise when you started, it was right on. And then you sort of drifted into the idea that, simply because ice cream exists, then, people are going to want ice cream. That's where you sort of trailed off. But your premise was right. And so here's the piece, and I'll tie it together. When are ice cream sales generally, in your opinion, the highest?
Summer.
Okay, summer.
Yeah, warmer months.
When
Okay.
more people are outside or wanting, ice cream.
Okay, good. So think about that as a relationship. So if more people are outside, then that means more people are away from their homes and apartments, which makes it more vulnerable. More people are outside, which makes it less likely that someone will be caught because more people, are like a camouflage. Pickpockets, cell phones use. So more people are out. So there's a higher chance that more cell phones are going to be left on tables or sitting on chairs. So even though ice cream doesn't cause crime rate, there is a relationship that when ice cream sales are high, crime rate is also high. So that's, Stephen, where I think you were headed. And so the idea is that, again, a correlation simply says that there is a relationship between two things, not that they cause each other, but generally when one thing is happening, so is the other. Without being causal, they simply have this relationship. So ice cream sales go up because, as was indicated, summer tends to be the hottest months. So the hotter it is, the more likely people are going to be outside for ice cream. And so if more people are outside, away from their homes, more susceptible to, again, leaving their cell phones, having wallets, having money, all of those things, then it increases the chance that someone who wants to commit a crime is going to happen. So that's the relationship. So a correlation then simply says that for at least two variables, they don't have to be competing, but for two variables, as one has an impact, so does the other. So there are three kinds of correlations. There's a positive correlation, a negative correlation, and a zero correlation. Now here's the difference. With a positive correlation, it simply means that the two variables, two or more, but that those variables are reacting in the same way. Now, it doesn't mean they're both increasing, nor does it mean they're both decreasing. But if they are both increasing at the same rate or at the same time, then it is a positive correlation. If they're both decreasing at the same time, it's still a positive correlation. So don't think of positive as up or down. Think of positive simply as movement in the same direction, right? So as an example, we could probably mention a relationship. If you and your partner are doing things together, then effectively you are moving in the same direction. So that could mean that you're both spending the same amount, which means you're decreasing your bank account at the same time. Still a correlation showing that you're moving together. Or maybe you're saving about the same amount, which means still you're moving in the same direction. So as long as the two variables are moving in the same direction, then it is a positive correlation. So let's look at that on the whiteboard. So it is simply this. So if one thing is going up while the other is going up, it is a positive correlation. Let's get a different color. If one is going down while the other is going down, it is still a positive correlation. For instance, the more I work out, the larger my muscles. So both are increasing, and it's not a given that exercise causes larger muscles. It can, but it doesn't have to, because some people do a lot of exercise and they don't get larger muscles. But because they're both increasing at the same time, it's a positive correlation. Or I could say, the fewer calories that I eat, the more weight I lose. Or not the more weight, less pounds do I gain. So pounds are staying low or decreasing, and the calories that I eat are decreasing. So since they're both moving in a negative direction, not a negative, they're both moving downward, it's still a positive correlation. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you're gonna get into this, but I'm assuming there are some instances where they it's an inverse relationship. So if one thing increases, another thing decreases, I'm assuming.
Yes, and that would be a negative correlation. So as one thing increases, or as one moves in one direction, the other moves in the opposite direction. So that would be an inverse relationship, which would be considered a negative correlation. So a positive correlation always moves in, both variables move in the same direction, whether up or down. Inverse relationship, they move as one moves in one direction, the other moves in the opposite direction.
So if you work out and you build muscle, doesn't generally mean you're going to end up being happy.
Well, if happiness is what we're looking to measure, then I would segregate that this way. The more I work out, the happier I am, right? So that would be a positive correlation. But if I say the more I work out, I'm saddened, no, because that's both increase. Oh, I'm less happy. The more I work out, the less happier I am. So as one goes up, the more I work out, the other is decreasing because I become less happy.
Okay.
Yeah. So as long as one is increasing or moving in one direction and the other is moving in the opposite direction, it's an inverse relationship or negative correlation. If they're both moving in the same direction, then it is a positive correlation. The other is,
I have a question real quick.
yeah, Alex.
How do correlations relate to psychology?
Because it's the variables of interest are generally about behavior or emotion. So even with ice cream and crime rate, right? So it's not that we're interested so much in ice cream and crime rate, but it does influence people's behavior and their thoughts and their feelings. So that's how psychology relates to it.
Thank you. That makes sense now. I was
Yeah.
kind of lost.
Yeah, no. That's a very good question. Because even as we look at the workout, I mean, a lot of people work out because they don't feel so good about themselves, and they're trying to either increase something, energy, physical appearance, whatever it is. So even though the idea of weights and lifting and all of those is almost separate, the idea that the psychology of it is they're doing it for a particular reason that could be emotional, behavioral, or even biological, right? They trying to diminish their cholesterol or whatever it is. So it still relates some directly with psychology and some indirectly.
Okay, that makes sense now.
Okay, cool. And so then the third is if I have two variables, two or more, and they pretty much have no impact on the other, that's a zero correlation. So let's say, for instance, the more it rains in the summer, the more people get married. Now, let's take that because I want to look at it a bit closer because some of you are probably already thinking, well, when it rains, more people are inside. If they're inside, maybe they're spending more time together. If they're more time together, they fall in love. If they fall in love, maybe they engage more. If they get engaged, they had to get married, right? So don't get crazy with it. All right, so let's look at it this way. And I'm going to use numbers because I think that will help. So let me clear this. And let's look at a positive, negative, and a zero correlation. Positive, negative, and zero. Okay. So if I look at those three, and I'm going to draw some lines. So let's do positive, do negative. And let's do 0. Well, 0, we're just going to have it's the same plane. All right. So if, actually, this will help if I add this in as well. There's something called the strength of the correlation. The strength of the correlation simply is this: the degree that one variable moves in relation to the other variable. The greatest movement is either a -1 up to a +1. It cannot be greater, nor can it be less than this range. So it can go from a +1 to a -1. And of course, that means that we always have a 0 correlation in between the two. So I'm going to look at the relationships, and if it is a strong positive relationship, for instance, if I say that the relationship of the variables is 0.98, 0.98 is positive. So since it's a positive number, meaning going toward +1, then that means that 98% of the time, as one variable moves, so does the other. So that means that it's a really strong correlation because, again, the most you can have is a 1. So if 98% of the time, one moves while the other also moves, then we can say that there is a relationship between those two. Again, not causal. It simply means there's a strong probability that if one changes, the other changes. So let's go back to ice cream sales and crime rate. If we said that there was a 98% correlation between ice cream sales and crime rate, we would simply mean that as crime rate increases, so does ice cream sales. Or ice cream sales increases, we see the same level of increase in crime rate. If I say there's only a 50% correlation, then that would simply mean that as one changes, the other only changes 50% of the time. So of course, that would also indicate that if it was a low correlation, say 10%, then that's not a strong correlation. We still see movement, but we only see movement about 10% of the time. All right, and that would be the same if we went the other way. So having a positive number would tend to mean that the variables are moving in an upward direction. If I make these numbers negative, let's say instead of these going up, I say it's a negative 0.98, then that means that it is moving in a downward direction, but 98% of the time, as one moves down, so does the other. Okay, that's the difference there. Now, if the negative correlation, which means there's an inverse relationship, because these are moving in opposite directions, it still doesn't matter, except we identify which variable we are using as a comparison. So let's make the left side the ice cream, and we'll make the right side crime rate. Where did it go? Okay, so if we make that, then I would say that my variable of interest is crime rate. So if I have a 0.75 correlation, then that says that since I'm interested in crime rate, it says that 75% of the time when crime rate moves, so does ice cream sales, right? Now, I know that we said that there was a relationship. I'm just using it as an example. So actually, let's make it better, because otherwise that could become confusing. So let me get rid of that, and let's do something that would actually make sense. So let's do weight training on one side, and the other side is so I'm now saying that 75% of the time that I do weight training, then my loss of fat increases 75% of the time. So as I increase my weight training, I decrease my fat consumption or fat retention by 75%. So even though they're moving in opposite directions, I can still use the strength of the correlation to say how much they move with respect to each other. And then for zero correlation, it is that as one variable moves in either direction, the other variable of interest is either unaffected or the occurrence is very, very seldom. All right, so I may look at two variables and say, oh, well, wait a minute, when this one moved, the other one did. But I would have to look over time to say, does it move every time that this one does? If it doesn't, then there's a zero correlation, because the relationship does not cause an impact to both sides at the same time. If it does, then it's a degree based on whether they are inversely proportional or whether they are directly proportional. Okay, so that's the idea with correlations. Any questions?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
I got a question. So can you have a correlation that has different values? For example, like say the weight one, like you are like doing more exercise and whatever, and you're like by a value of 0.75, so you're losing weight by a value of 60. Is that a
Yeah,
valid correlation?
yeah. No, that's still a good correlation, but the correlation would not necessarily, well, let me say it this way. The correlation is a factor of movement, right? So whichever variables you use, you look for the percentage of change in one related to the other. So yeah,
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see.
So that's the idea. So yeah, you can use any variables that you want, and if the variables are both increasing or decreasing at the same time, it's a positive correlation, and you can determine how much they're changing in relation to each other by the strength of the relationship.
Oh, okay, I see. That makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. Yep. Any others?
Yes.
Yeah, go
Oh,
right ahead.
go ahead.
No, go ahead. Did you change your mind? Okay. All right. So that's correlation. Okay. All right. So as you can see here, now, and this is nothing to be concerned about right now, but notice there's a least squared fit, which means that when they plot both variables here, they look at how both variables continue to navigate around the point of interest. Same thing here. And then for a zero correlation, notice that they are more dispersed. So it shows that there is no real relationship because they don't plot within a certain sphere. Again, that's not something you need to be concerned with. Just understand that the strength of the relationship, the closer it gets to a +1 or to a -1, that is the strongest possible relationships, because one is as high and as low as it can go. The closer it gets to 0, the weaker the relationship between the two variables, to the point that if it gets to 0 or within, I would even say 5 points of 0, then it is probably more structured as a 0 correlation than it would be negative or positive. So I guess the key there is to note what the strength of the relationship is and how often that relationship stays intact. So again, I can have a relationship that occurs once or twice, but if it doesn't happen the majority of the time, then that means that the action for one is not consistent enough to say that there's a real relationship. And again, the reason that it's not causation is because with correlations, we only look for relationships. We don't look for cause. We look for cause in experiments, and we'll talk about those later. Okay, so notice
I
here.
had 2 quick questions.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so the first one was, can you please go back to the little chart you were making?
Oh, on the screen? If I didn't erase it. I don't think I did, but we'll see. Oh, no. Okay, good.
So for the positive,
Yeah.
just to clarify, does that mean like no matter how low the difference is, it's gonna still stay a positive correlation?
As long as it's consistent over time. So let's say that let's use the ice cream sales and crime rate, right? So I would probably want to look at that over the entire month that is hot. Because if ice cream sales continue to move, but then crime rate stops, then that means that there's no consistent relationship between what's happening between both of them.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as it's consistent, like this one shows, then I would say, yes, a positive relationship. But if crime rate literally stops, but ice cream sales continues to increase, or even if it decreases, but crime rate does not move up or down the same way or to the same degree, then it would no longer be considered a positive correlation. So the effects have to be consistent over time. Because we could look at the same thing and probably say that, well, during the winter months, as ice cream sales decrease, we also see a decrease in crime rate. However, if during winter months I saw an increase in crime rate, now as one is going down, the other is going up, that would no longer be a positive correlation, it'd be a negative correlation. Or if later on, the next year I do this and ice cream sales go up or down, but crime rate stays constant, then that means there is no consistent relationship between the change in one with respect to the other, and then it would be a 0 correlation.
Okay. All right.
Okay, cool.
Oh, and the second question was, is there any real formula? Because I've seen the notes, it says calculated by a formula.
Yeah, there is a formula, but trust me, let me say it this way. It's way above this class, because this is it's a least squared fit. It's an algebraic expression. And you look at all the data points, and you actually have to look at each data point after you've gathered a mean. So you would look at all of the data, all of the numbers that you collected, and say these percentages. You'd have to take an average of that, and then you would take the square root of the average and subtract each mean from it. And then you would plot that on this to determine whether or not it was going to be a positive or negative correlation or 0. So yeah, there is one. I would think if you take Algebra 2 or even first level calculus or pre-calculus, you would probably get into, or even probability. So if you take statistics, advanced statistics, you'll probably get into the arithmetics of doing a least squared fit and determining what that plot is. So yeah, that's way above this class. So I'll stay away from that for now.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so looking at some of the correlations here, right? The something old is usually clothing that belongs to an older woman who is happily married. So the behaviors, why do brides wear something old and something borrowed? Because there is this relationship or perceived relationship that if you get something old and borrowed, your marriage will last longer. People who throw salt over there, who believe in, those things, the idea was that there were bad and good spirits. And so the bad spirits were on the left shoulder, and salt was used to feed them. So if you threw salt over your left shoulder, you were feeding the bad spirit, which would cause them to go away. And so if you believe that, then they believe that there was a relationship. If I did that, then I had less bad luck. Right. So again, these kind of things, they're superstitions, but people associate them with real relationships. But we'll go beyond that. All right. So now going away from, no, not necessarily going completely away from correlations, but into experiments. Now, experiments are looking to determine cause. Correlations only want relationship. Experiments look for cause. So they create conditions that, if repeated, will ideally get the same results the major number of times. And as we talked about briefly last week, with statistical significance, if I create an experiment and I set up the conditions, then I want at least 95 or more % of the time that I get the same results. If I get that, then I can say pretty much that those conditions do cause a particular event or behavior. So experimental research is just that, carefully controlled scientific procedure, because we set up the variables and the conditions that involves the manipulation and control of variables to determine cause and effect. So what is the trigger or stimulus, and what is the response? So we're trying to explain a particular phenomena, and in order to explain that, we do an experiment to test the validity of those conditions that will cause that outcome. So some of the things that are involved there: independent variable versus dependent variable, experimental group, control group, random assignment, and confounding variables. And we'll talk about each of those. So an independent variable, let me type this on the screen. And for those with the book, it won't be the exact definition they use in the book, but it will be close enough that it won't pose a problem. So the independent variable is not subject to the treatment, but is the cause for behavioral change.
Yes, but isn't this open to bias? I mean, all research.
Oh, yeah, but that's when we talk about confounding variables. And there is research, there's bias from the researcher, and there can also be bias from the participant. So yeah, but the independent variable and dependent variable the dependent variable is more subject to bias than the independent variable. But yes, bias does exist, but it doesn't change the definition of an independent or dependent variable.
Okay.
Yeah. So the dependent variable is the subject of the treatment, and what is expected to change. So that's the difference between the independent and dependent variable. So an example, I give a piece of chocolate to each of you to see if it changes how much you study. So what would cause the change if there's any change in that example?
Chocolate.
So would the chocolate be independent or dependent?
Independent.
Yes, it would be independent because it's causing the change. So that's the definition. The treatment is the independent variable. So the treatment that I'm applying is used to cause change in something else or to manipulate something else. So the independent variable is not subject to the treatment. In most instances, it is the treatment, and it is the cause for the change that we're looking to measure. Now, it doesn't mean that there will be a change. It's just that we are testing it to see if it does, and it's still 3 or 4 states. It either increases the behavior, decreases the behavior doesn't change, or whatever caused before remains constant. Well, actually, that would be 3, because if it doesn't change or doesn't cause anything, it's a constant. All right, so those 3 outcomes are expected from any experiment: an increase, decrease, or to stay the same. The dependent variable is what is receiving the treatment, so that we will see if the treatment causes a change in the behavior or state of the dependent variable. So in that particular case, the example that I gave you, if you remember it, what was the dependent variable?
Out of actually giving the chocolate to the students.
No, actually, that's a good answer, but that's not it. What am I looking for the students to do? What did I want to measure?
Increase our ability to do homework.
Well, study more, right? So the change is not the student. The change is the study habit. So if I'm looking to see if the study habit will change, that is the dependent variable, because the study habit is either going to change, go up, increase, it's going to go less, or it's not going to change at all. So the behavior is the dependent variable. Whatever is expected to change is the dependent variable. Okay? Not necessarily the people that you're giving it to. They just happen to be byproducts of the experiment. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Mark. So everybody else is okay.
For the most
Right.
part, yes.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I mean, because if nobody says no, then I'll assume 1 yes represents the class.
I have a question though. How are you going to present these in like an exam? What's the format for these particular correlation questions?
Well, you want me to give you the answer, Alex? I'm not doing it. Come on, man. It would be similar to the example I just gave you, Alex. What if I were to say, you know, ice cream sales over the last 6 months has increased, and so has crime rate. Is that a positive, negative, or 0 correlation?
Okay, now I got it. Thank you for clarifying.
You guys, you stick with Alex. Alex keeps me on my toes. All right. So that's the independent dependent variable. So now let's take a look at something else. Another part of this. The other part is experimental group versus control group. Now, and it's seemingly straightforward, but I'll hopefully make it even easier. We're applying the treatment to something because we want to see if it will cause a change in that something. So if I'm applying the treatment, that means that I want to give the treatment to the group that I'm experimenting on. So the experimental group gets the treatment. But if I want to know that under most conditions that their treatment really is causing change in that group, then I should also measure how people behave that don't get the treatment. So that would be the control group. So the control group does not get the treatment, the experimental group does. So let's use this example. I have decided over the next year I want to be wealthy and have money like Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos. So I've got this incredible drug that will give you photographic memory. So I said, you know what? I want to see if the drug works. Well, if I give it to everybody,
I volunteer as tribute.
huh?
I said I volunteer as tribute for the photographic memory drug.
You got it.
It does sound really nice.
Yeah, yeah, I take it myself. But the idea is, so if I give it to everybody, and I don't know if, as Mark mentioned earlier about bias, I don't know if some people already have photographic memory. I don't know if some people are taking some other drugs that are causing the same impact. I don't know if they have psychological conditions that may also give them photographic memory if they didn't take my pill or not. So one of the better ways of determining that is to separate the group into two. So I'll have an experimental group where I will give my drug to, and then I will have a control group that I won't give the drug to, but they won't know it. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And then I'll measure after the group has taken the pill, I will measure if in fact the group that got the experimental drug tends to have higher instances of photographic memory. Now, if the people that are in the control group, the ones that didn't get the treatment, also are showing the same signs for memory and, recall, then I don't know if my drug really worked. If the people that I gave the treatment do show greater signs of memory and recall, then at least my first assumption, my first clinical trial, would be that, yep, the drug seems to work.
But then, Professor, quick question and observation. Would a double-blind study work in this case or not really?
Actually, it would, a double-blind or single-blind. So single-blind or double-blind. And we're actually going to talk about those next, Alex. So here, the other thing that I want to do, and Alex mentioned it, Mark mentioned it earlier, is I want to decrease the amount of bias that I have in it. Now, I want to be this rich guy, and I've already got some volunteers here from the class, but that means that I want to pick the people that this is actually going to work on. Well, if I only pick the people that I think it's going to work on, then I have created researcher bias, because I'm only picking the people that it's going to look good for me. But if I want to do this honestly, then I want to pick as many people in the population as I can to see if in fact it works for anybody. So rather than picking people, I do random assignment. So random assignment, instead of me introducing bias, gives everyone an equal chance of being considered for the study. A way that I could do that, at least one way, is I take 2 decks of cards. Now, we're virtual, so it won't be as easy. But if we were at the campus, as you came into the class, I could give everyone a card, or you just pick a card at random. You pick a card, and everybody sit down. And then to pick the people for the experiment, I would take the other deck, shuffle it, and then as I pull any card up, whomever has that number becomes a part of the experiment. That way, I haven't chosen anybody, and everybody in the class has an equal chance of being picked. So random assignment adds validity to the experiment. Now, what might be the problem with running that experiment just as I've described it so far?
Maybe all the persons that are picked is gonna work on, so you kind of like create a bias without knowing it.
That's right. So let's take it a little further. If I don't have any bias, I mean, I've done the random assignment, what is still a problem that I might experience with that experiment?
There's no control group.
No, I had 2 control groups. So remember, I gave one the treatment and I didn't give the other.
Okay.
Maybe the sample size is not big enough.
Well, yeah, but you guys, there's 30 something people in the class. So ideally it would be 50 people. So I'd bring in another class and do the same thing. Ideally you want an N of 50, but something outside of what we put together so far as the experiment.
Well, possibly the people that you chose might actually try to kind of like come together and try to somehow make it seem like they have the photographic memory, so they might tamper it that way. So you
Okay.
do to outside force that you
Yeah,
don't.
I would put that as
Environmental
bias.
factors.
Yeah, environmental factors, chemical factors, medical factors. Some people may be taking other medication that makes them more susceptible to my drug. But if I don't know what they're taking, then they may show up with the photographic memory of the recall more than the others. And I think it's my drug when in fact it's a combination of my drug with another drug that I don't know about. I can't control for that. However, if I wanted to try to control for it, then I may look for as many chemicals that cause an impact to my drug, and then do a questionnaire at the beginning. Was anyone on these particular medications prior to taking the treatment? The other thing could be that some people may just have a much higher IQ. So they are already good at memory and recall. And so it may just be natural for them to already have a higher memory recall quotient than others. So effectively, guys, what I'm discussing is that fourth bullet point, confounding variables. And a simple way of saying that is if something that we didn't add into the experiment or consider in the experiment can confuse the results, it is considered a confounding variable. And so you try to isolate as many of those as you can so that it doesn't cause confusion with the results. And you really do see from the conditions of the experiment what caused the result or the outcome. So those are the key features of an experiment and why those are important. Any questions on those four before we move on? Okay. In the absence, I will continue. Okay. So let's look at, we'll just look at one of these. Oh, and Alex, by the way, these aren't the ones that you'll see on the exam, but this would be the form or a format, based on what you asked before. So, and this would even be for, it'd be similar to correlations, but in this particular instance, it's just about experiments. So a therapist wants to test a new drug designed to increase the ability of teenagers with ADHD to take accurate notes in class. All right, so don't respond by unmuting. Type it in the chat box. What is the independent variable and what is the dependent variable? So type it in the chat box. In that, when a therapist wants to test a new drug designed to increase the ability of teenagers with ADHD to take accurate notes in class. So what's the IV and what's the DV? As you know, that's also your first question to determine attendance. All right. Okay, so let's see. Okay, I got a few more coming in. All right. So the independent variable is the drug. Remember, the independent variable causes a change in something. So we're not looking at the teenagers. we're looking at the ability of the teenagers to take accurate notes. So the ability to take accurate notes is the independent variable, or taking notes is probably more correct. So taking notes is the dependent variable. Now, does the drug cause an increase, decrease, or no change in the ability to take accurate notes? So for those who didn't answer that specifically, think of it again this way. The independent variable is what is going to cause a change. And then the dependent variable is the change that I'm trying to measure. And I'm trying to measure it for an increase, decrease, or if it stays the same. Okay, so that's how you look at independent variables, dependent variables. Now, if I were to put a control group, an experimental group in that scenario, then what I would probably do is administer a drug to half of the teenagers that are in the class, and then give another drug to the other half of the class, but the other half would not have any kind of chemicals in it. And that, of course, is called a placebo. So placebo, inactive substance used as a control. So since it's a control, it is given to the control group. Right, so again, let's say that I've created my new drug, which is going to eliminate migraines. So I get a class, or I get volunteers who have migraines, and I want to give them, and maybe I use fluorescent lights, because fluorescent lights will cause migraines. So I put them in conditions where there are migraines, and then I give the one half of the group the drug with the migraine medicine in it, and then I give the other half a pill, but it has no medication in it. Well, by knowing which group has what, I can measure if the experimental group who got the treatment lost their migraines more than those who got the placebo. If that's true, then I have a better idea that my drug works. But if the number of people who took the placebo now just mentally believe that they don't have a migraine anymore and they lose their migraines, then I can't attribute migraine decrease just to my drug. And that's why we use a placebo. So as mentioned before, sample bias. If I only pull in people that I know are going to respond well to my drug, then that doesn't necessarily represent the larger population of people who have migraines. And that's where I've increased bias into the sample. Random assignment. Again, the more likely that I can not purposefully select someone to participate in the experiment, but allow it to be as random as possible so everyone has an equal chance. And ideally, my sample population will represent the larger population, and I can push this out for use. Participant bias also exists, and someone said it earlier. They get together because they I don't know, have been promised something if the drug works. So of course, it's a benefit to them if they can give good results. An example, and it's a horrible one, but the example's good, but the reason for the example is bad. Arthur Andersen used to be, I think, the largest accounting firm in the country, and maybe internationally. Well, they were the accountants to Enron. Enron was the energy company that defaulted and ended up with 4,000 people losing their life savings and 401k and all of that. Well, the people who were doing the accounting knew that they were cooking the books and they were putting false information in there, but it was a very large account. So even as participants doing their accounting, they decided to validate the books so that Enron could continue operating and they could continue getting paid. So that's the kind of bias that can be introduced into an experiment or real world situation. Now, prior to that, some of the things that we didn't look at, and we talked about experiment or bias, and then this blind studies. So Alex mentioned about double blind. So let's cover both of those, single blind and double blind. And I'm going to use the whiteboard again to draw these. So in a single blind study, you have the researcher, and then you also have a number of participants, or a number of people who are going to participate in the experiment. Now, in a single blind study, it simply means that only the researcher knows who is getting what. So the participants don't know, but the researcher does. But the researcher is the only one. So administering the pills that I talked about, then I would know that I'm giving X to student A, X to student B, Y to student C, and Y to student D. But students A, B, C, D have no idea whether they're getting the treatment or the placebo. That's a single blind study because only one part of the equation is blind. That's the participants. In a double blind study, the researcher nor the participants know who's getting what. And it helps to eliminate bias. So none of these folks know who's getting what. One of the reasons for doing that is specifically to eliminate bias, but it also disallows any possible manipulation of either the participants or the administration of the drug. So if nobody knows what's going on, one of the ways that I could do this is I could, let's say that we got 33 people in the class. So let's say that I take 11 people in one group and 12 in the other. Well, actually, that's not 30, that's 15. So it would be 16 in one group and 17 in the other. And that's not doing so well, so that. All right, let's do it this way. Okay, so 16 in one group, 17 in the other. Now, what I will do is I will create a box, and in that box, I will put 33 bottles. And in those 33 bottles, at the bottom of those bottles, I'm going to put a barcode that a human can't read. Every one of these has a barcode. So I will take 16 of those bottles, and on one side, well, actually, to keep from knowing which is which, I put a barcode on all of them. The only thing that I know is that I'm going to take 16 pills with medication and put in these bottles. But again, I can't do the barcode, so I don't know which ones. I put 16 in these, and then I put 17 over here with no treatment, without the medication. And then just like Powerball little things, I mix them all up. So now I don't know which bottle has, humanly, I don't know which bottle has the treatment and which one has the placebo. So all I do now is give 16 people a bottle. I give 17 people a bottle. Of course, unbeknownst to me, there's a list that says this barcode corresponds to placebo. This barcode is non-placebo. So as each person brings their bottle back, now the experiment is over, I can compare the barcode and say this person had the placebo. For this barcode that was turned in, this person had the treatment, right? So that's double blind. During the experiment, nobody knows who got what, and they only know till after the experiment. That way you diminish bias. So that's a double blind study.
Professor, question.
Yep.
What is more effective, a double blind or a single blind?
To eliminate bias, a double blind is, but in some instances, you may want the researcher to know who's getting what if you're trying to segregate it for a particular reason. So let's say that it's male female. If there's something that I know that I'm testing for males that could have an impact to female, let's say testosterone to grow hair, right? If you look at some of the hair growth products, they said, use it for men, but don't use it for women, because with estrogen, it creates different effects. So in that instance, I may want to know who's getting what. But if I don't want to know, and I don't want to have that bias because it's for the general population, then I would probably use a double blind.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that for me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And so we'll talk, when we talk about social psychology a little bit, then we'll talk about ethnocentrism. But for now, we'll leave that alone. Okay, so is that clear to everybody so far?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yep.
All right, so now these are just tips, guys. The last two slides are just tips. Some of you are just getting back into school, and some of you may have been out of school for a while and you're just getting back into there. But I can say with great certainty, and this is through research and my own, that having a schedule for studying will keep this stuff from creeping up on you. And give yourself permission to take a break. And, maximize the efficiency of your time. As one person said, actually it was a guy I knew who was with NASA, and his son was studying. And so his son liked rap music. So whenever he was studying, he would go in and he would listen to rap music. And so his dad went in one day and he said, you know what, why don't we pack up and go sit in on these guys practicing for their next album? And the son was like, look, they're not going to let you, those generally are closed sessions, you can't go in there. He said, okay, well, if you can't go to their practice, why are you letting them into yours? The reality is, music with words and strong beats detract from your ability to memorize things, or even to effectively or and efficiently study. So maximize the time and eliminate as much as you can as a distraction. Even though it's not written up here, I think I've said this before, but just in case I didn't, if you can teach this, you know it. And if you have someone that you're trying to explain it to and you can't, then you probably need to study a little more. Distribute your practice, your studying. As I said on the first day, the amygdala is the part of the limbic system that is responsible for stress and anxiety. If you force your studying, if you cram, you decrease the ability of the brain to process information, which means you're pretty much wasting your time. But you know that we have an exam on a certain particular date. So study 15, 20 minutes, an hour each week on those areas so that you aren't getting to a point where you have to cram. And if you can do that, then you're pretty much okay. Okay, so now, that's the end of chapter 1. Any questions on chapter 1?
No.
Okay. All right. So, and if there is, just chime in. All right. So we're going to watch a short video. And then after that, we'll get into, let's see, where are we? Yep. Let's see. Oh, it's 1:47. I've been talking that long? Yep. I guess so. We'll watch the video and then we will make that the end of the day. All right.
Is it a professor?
Hi.
Can I ask a quick question? This was just from earlier about correlation.
You absolutely can.
Okay. So, oh no, sorry, my cat's on my keyboard. So if the correlation is like for the strength of the correlation, would a number like negative 0.98 be a strong negative correlation? And
Well, it would be a negative strong relationship.
Okay.
Yeah, so just think of it as a relationship. Don't think of it because, and you could say it's not a negative correlation, right? Because if it's a negative correlation, there's an inverse relationship, right? So think of negative only as it relates to the direction.
Okay.
If you're only talking about the strength of each component in the relationship, then it's either a strong correlation, not negative or positive, just a strong correlation. The negative 0.98 or positive 98 tells you which direction.
Okay. Okay.
Did that help?
Yes, that did help. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Good. All right. So let's see. Okay. Yeah, we're there. Yeah, I'll find this and then I'll share it with you guys. It's only about 6 minutes, so we'll still be in our window. Yeah. Share.
Do you think it's possible to control someone's attention? Even more than that, what about predicting human behavior? I think those are interesting ideas if you could. I mean, for me, that'd be the perfect superpower. Actually, kind of an evil way of approaching it. But for myself, in the past, I've spent the last 20 years studying human behavior from a rather unorthodox way, picking pockets. When we think of misdirection, we think of something as looking off to the side when actually it's often the things that are right in front of us that are hardest things to see, the things that you look at every day that you're blinded to. For example, how many of you still have your cell phones on you right now? Great. Double check, make sure you still have them on you. I was doing some shopping beforehand. Now, you've looked at them probably a few times today, but I'm gonna ask you a question about them. Without looking at your cell phone directly yet, can you remember the icon in the bottom right corner? Bring them out, check, and see how accurate you were. How'd you do? Show of hands, did we get it? Now that you're done looking at those, close them down, because every phone has something in common. No matter how you organize the icons, you still have a clock on the front. So without looking at your phone, what time was it? You just looked at your clock, right? It's an interesting idea. Now I'll ask you to take that a step further with a game of trust. Close your eyes. I realize I'm asking you to do that while you just heard there's a pickpocket in the room, but close your eyes. Now, you've been watching me for about 30 seconds. With your eyes closed, what am I wearing? Make your best guess. What color is my shirt? What color is my tie? Now open your eyes. By show of hands, were you right? It's interesting, isn't it? Some of us are a little bit more perceptive than others. It seems that way. But I have a different theory about that model of attention. They have fancy models of attention, Posner's trendy model of attention. For me, I like to think of it very simple, like a surveillance system. It's kind of like you have all these fancy sensories, and inside your brain is a little security guard. For me, I like to call him Frank. So Frank is sitting at a desk. He's got all sorts of cool information in front of him, high-tech equipment. He's got cameras, he's got a little phone that he can pick up, listen to the ears, all these senses, all these perceptions. But attention is what steers your perceptions, is what controls your reality. It's the gateway to the mind. If you don't attend to something, you can't be aware of it. But ironically, you can attend to something without being aware of it. That's why there's the cocktail effect. When you're in a party, you're having conversations with someone, and yet you can recognize your name and you didn't even realize you were listening to that. Now, for my job, I have to play with techniques to exploit this, to play with your attention as a limited resource. So if I could control how you spend your attention, if I could maybe steal your attention through a distraction. Now, instead of doing it like misdirection and throwing off to the side, instead what I choose to focus on is Frank. To be able to play with the Frank inside your head, your little security guard, and get you, instead of focusing on your external senses, just to go internal for a second. So if I ask you to access a memory, like, what is that? What just happened? Do you have a wallet? Do you have an American Express in your wallet? And when I do that, your Frank turns around. He accesses the file. He has to rewind the tape. And what's interesting is he can't rewind the tape at the same time that he's trying to process new data. Now, I mean, this sounds like a good theory, but I could talk for a long time and tell you lots of things, and they may be true, a portion of them. But I think it's better if I try to show that to you here live. So, if I come down, I'm going to do a little bit of shopping. Just hold still where you are. Hello, how are you? It's lovely to see you. You did a wonderful job on stage. You have a lovely watch that doesn't come off very well. Do you have your ring as well? Good, just taking inventory. You're like a buffet. It's hard to tell where to start. There's so many great things. Hi, how are you? Good to see you. Hi, sir, could you stand up for me, please? Just right where you are. Oh, you're married. You follow the directions well. That's nice to meet you, sir. You don't have a whole lot inside your pockets. Anything down by the pocket over here? Hopefully so. Have a seat. There you go. You're doing well. Hi, sir. How are you? Good to see you, sir. You have a ring, a watch. Do you have a wallet on you?
I don't.
Well, we'll find one for you. Come on up this way, Joe. Give Joe a round of applause. Come on up, Joe. Let's play a game. Pardon me. Don't think that you need this clicker anymore. You can have that. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Come on up to the stage, Joe. Let's play a little game. Now, do you have anything in your front pockets? Money. All right, let's try that. Can you stand right over this way for me? Turn around and let's see. If I give you something that belongs to me, this is just something, a half poker chip. Hold out your hand for me. Watch it kind of close. Now, this is a task for you to focus on. Now, you have your money in your front pocket here?
Yep.
Good. I'm not going to actually put my hand in your pocket. I'm not ready for that kind of commitment. One time a guy had a hole in his pocket, and that was rather traumatizing. I was looking for his wallet, and he gave me his phone number. It was a big miscommunication. So let's do this simply. Squeeze your hand. Squeeze it tight. Do you feel the poker chip in your hand?
I do.
Would you be surprised if I could take it out of your hand? Say yes?
Very.
Good. Open your hand. Thank you very much. I'll cheat if you give me a chance. Make it harder for me. Just use your hand. Grab my wrist, but squeeze. Squeeze firm. Did you see it go?
No.
No, it's not here. Open your hand. See, while we're focused on the hand, it's sitting on your shoulder right now. Go ahead and take it off. Now, let's try that again. Hold your hand out flat. Open it up all the way. Put your hand up a little bit higher, but watch it close there, Joe. See, if I did it slowly, it'd be back on your shoulder. Joe, we're going to keep doing this till you catch it. You're going to get it eventually. I have faith in you. Squeeze firm. Squeeze. You're human. You're not slow. It's back on your shoulder. You were focused on your hand. That's why you were distracted. While you were watching this, I couldn't quite get your watch off. It was difficult. Yet you had something inside your front pocket. Do you remember what it was?
Money.
Check your pocket. See if it's still there. Is it still there? Oh, that's where it was. Go ahead and put it away. We're just shopping. This trick's more about the timing, really. I'm going to try to push it inside your hand. Put your other hand on top for me, would you? It's amazingly obvious now, isn't it? It looks a lot like the watch I was wearing, doesn't it?
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Oh, thanks. But it's only a start. Let's try it again a little bit differently. Hold your hands together. Put your other hand on top. Now, if you're watching this little token, this obviously has become a little target. It's like a red herring. If we watch this kind of close, it looks like it goes away. It's not back on your shoulder. It falls out of the air, lands right back in the hand. Did you see it go? It's funny. You got a little guy, he's union. He works up there all day. If I did slowly, if it goes straight away, it lands down by your pocket. I believe, is it in this pocket, sir? No, don't reach in your pocket. That's a different show. Sorry, that's rather strange. They have shots for that. And can I show them what that is? That's rather bizarre. Is this yours, sir? I have no idea how that works. We'll just send that over there. That's great. I need help with this one. Step over this way for me. Now, don't run away. You had something down by your pants pocket. I was checking mine. I couldn't find everything. But I noticed you had something here. Feel the outside of your pocket for a moment. Down here, I noticed this. Is this something of yours, sir? Is this... I had no idea. That's a shrimp.
Saving it for later.
You've entertained all these people in a wonderful way. Better than you know. So we'd love to give you this lovely watch as a gift. Hopefully it matches his taste. But also we have a couple of other things. A little bit of cash.
Yep.
And then we have a few other things. These all belong to you, along with a big round of applause from all your friends. Joe, thank you very much. So, same question I asked you before, but this time you don't have to close your eyes. What am I wearing? Attention is a powerful thing. Like I said, it shapes your reality. So I guess I'd like to pose that question to you. If you could control somebody's attention, what would you do with it? Thank you.
Okay, guys, that's it for today.
When did he remove his tie?
On his way
The
back
shirt.
when he
The
said
shirt changed.
when he said I won't need the mic anymore or something like that. And now and I'm only doing this now because I've watched this like 20 times to try to figure it out. But he was going back when he says that he was already manipulating something, but you don't pay attention to it. So yeah, it's actually pretty good. And I think if you watch it a couple times, it may still take you to get that. But that's it, guys. So have a great day. Have a great Tuesday. We will see you on Wednesday, and we will start chapter 2.
Thank
Have a good day,
Hey,
Dr.
thank
Humphrey.
you.
Thank
Thank you, Dr.
Humphrey.
Humphrey.
That was great.
You're more than welcome. Oh, and Alex, that sample document is out on campus.
Well, where on campus, Professor?
Under the file section. So if you go under the file section, you'll see one that says sample doc.
Okay. And
That's it.
I'm going to use Peter Pan as the story. Is that fine for my story?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, buddy. Take care. Have a good day, all right?
See you Wednesday.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.